Blender is incredibly difficult to learn, and this short cutaway should show you exactly why.
Hey guys, today we're going to be playing a fun game of Spot the Difference. For the first picture, we have the control panel of the X-29 Crewman fighter jet. And for the second picture, we have the Blender viewport. Now, if you look super closely, you'll see that there's actually no difference between these two pictures, and I was just pranking you guys. We have to solve this problem because so many new Blender users are getting turned off of the software just for how complicated it is. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys a couple of techniques that can make Blender really easy to learn. But first, why is Blender so complicated? So if you've ever tried using Blender, you'll know that obviously it's a very hard software to learn how to use. I mean, there's a million features, every Blender tutorial is like an hour long and it's impossible to pay attention to. It's like the software was intentionally designed to be difficult to work with, right? Now believe me, part of me wants to be like, oh, Blender wasn't intentionally designed to be complicated, you guys are just bad at using it.
Blender is hard. Am I right? Wrong! Blender is easy! You suck!
But it almost seems like Blender was intentionally designed to be difficult to learn. I mean, for starters, let's take a look at the viewport. Now, the viewport has a pretty bad design because it unintentionally applies Barry Schwartz's paradox of choice, which essentially states that if we have too many options to choose from, we can experience anxiety, decision paralysis, and eventually regret our original decision. So Blender isn't exactly complicated, we just get overwhelmed by a multitude of options that we know nothing about. Opening up Blender is the equivalent of trying to find a stock on the market that's going to double in value tomorrow while having no knowledge of the stock market. When we try to model something, we have so many options that we just don't know what tool to use. I mean, if the viewport was just like extrude face button here, I don't know, inset face button here, you know, they were like nice and massive, they were clearly labeled, I mean, it would be so much easier to use. Because all the useful features of Blender are just tucked away. Like to get a subsurf modifier, one of the most popular things that like people use, you have to go to this little tab down here in the middle of the whole list. It's not like bigger or doesn't stand out. You have to click add modifier, you have to go down to this tiny little list and hit subsurf, and it looks the exact same as everything else, and yet it's like the most used, the most valuable, and they just tuck it away down there. So while the layout of the viewport is really practical, it just makes it so hard to find the things that you need, especially when you don't know what you're doing. I guess you could say Blender is kind of the opposite of a user-friendly program. They sort of make the software with the assumption that everyone just knows what they're doing, everyone's a 3D artist, and if you're a beginner, oh, good luck trying to figure this stuff out. So now the main point of the video, how do you make this easier to learn? Well, first of all, I would say just cut out all the things you're never going to use. Stop paying attention to them. This tab up here, I have no clue what this is. Ignore it. This one, you can change the color of the background if you want. That's kind of cool, I guess. You can make it like pink or yellow or whatever, I don't care. Modifiers are here. So in 3 years of using Blender, I would say only about 10%, maybe 20% of this entire sidebar is going to be filled with stuff that you actually use often. The settings up here change like the way you see your viewport. I mean, there's this cool setting up here. If I click this arrow, cavity, that makes your mesh like all cool and outlined and stuff like that. Obviously, edit mode, like stuff to actually modify your meshes, is going to be up here. Yada yada yada, extrude, bevel, loop cuts, all that good stuff. Those are the most important tools in my opinion. You have modeling up here, modifiers and rendering down here, viewport settings up here if you want, then there's a couple little buttons and stuff dotted around for more tiny features. Animation, don't care about it. Rendering, don't care about it. Compositing, it's just like Photoshop when you're done with your render. Scripting, you will never ever use this. Prove me wrong. So hopefully that was a little bit more simple. I mean, when you boil Blender down to its primary features, the viewport just seems a lot more understandable. So many people get caught up with like, oh, there's so many buttons up here, modeling, sculpting, there's so many things you can do, but you really just have to sort of cut them out of the visual. Like, don't even think about them, just know, okay, editing tools, like if I want to just, I don't know, freaking move a face around, bring it up and stuff like that, that's going to be all up here. Modifiers, automatic operations for your mesh to change the way it looks. That's going to be down here along with the rendering settings. Coloring is down here or in the shading tab. It's basically the same thing. And that's 90% of what you're going to use. Everything else is, I mean, they're good tools, like all the other stuff, but they all have such specific uses that you just don't use them that often. Besides simplifying the viewport, honestly, my best advice is to just try. If you see something you like, just try and recreate it. It doesn't matter if it looks absolutely horrible, because you're going to learn something either way. If you're like, oh, I want to make a pine tree, okay, you'd have to add in a cube, scale it way down, scale it up. Okay, that'll be like the trunk. Now you need leaves. Okay, how do you make leaves? Let's hide the trunk so we can focus on that. I'm gonna go to a 2D view. We can add in a circle for the leaves. Where is that at? Right here. I'm going to extrude these edges up, scale them, unhide that trunk. Okay, now we can just scale this guy down. Shift D, maybe rotate it, Shift D, scale it, grab all these guys. That's a pretty bad looking pine tree, but you get the point I'm trying to make. If you want to make something in Blender, don't think like, oh, I'm not good enough, or oh, I'm sure the tutorials for that are going to be way too hard to follow. Like, no, it's easy to make things in Blender, it's just your mind that's holding you back. And plus, every time you make something, you're going to get slightly better at it. Like, if that was my first time making a pine tree, okay, if I try again, it's going to be easier and easier and easier the more I do it, and then soon it's going to start looking really good. The second you download this software, I mean, don't think to yourself like, oh, I'm a beginner 3D modeler, I'm still figuring things out. Like, no, if Blender's on your computer, just tell yourself like, oh, I'm a 3D modeler, I can do all this stuff now. I have my meshes, I have my editing tools, my modifiers, and coloring if I really need it. That's all you need to be a 3D modeler. Then you just manipulate faces and scale stuff down, I don't know, duplicate it until you have the mesh you're looking for. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to be frustrating. I mean, obviously, like, you're eventually going to get stuck trying to solve a couple problems, and it's going to be frustrating to try to figure it out. But unfortunately, you can't really get around that. I mean, whenever you're learning something new, you're going to get stuck behind a problem that you can't figure out, and it's going to take you a while to get the answer. But just don't give up. Keep trying, and have faith in yourself. Don't overcomplicate things, and just do it. Look up the tutorial, figure out what you're trying to make, try to learn as much as you can, and just believe that you can do it. You have Blender, you're a 3D modeler, go model it.